Hello and welcome to a very special interview with the Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, Rajiv Kumar. November the 8th is the first anniversary of demonetization, and a critical question we shall ask today is, has it achieved its initial objectives, or is it just a step too far to make that claim? That's one of the key issues I shall discuss with Dr. Kumar. I also want to talk to him about GST, about ease of doing business. I want to talk to him about the government's hopes to recapitalize banks, and of course about the wider state of the economy. Dr. Kumar, let's start with demonetization. On November the 8th last year, when the Prime Minister made the announcement, he initially identified three objectives, and they were tackling counterfeit money, tackling terror funding, and black money. Subsequently, he added to that an attempt to reduce dependence on cash. Let's start with the first two. I put it to you that in terms of tackling counterfeit money and in terms of tackling terror funding, demonetization has either failed or it hasn't produced impressive results.
Neither, Karan, because clearly there is much less counterfeit money, and you know that you would know that by a visit to Kathmandu, where all the which was a huge reservoir of counterfeit money being produced by our neighboring countries, and you will see that all the old sort of 500 and 1,000 rupee notes are not in circulation any longer. And on the terror funding,
let's take I'll come to terror funding more. Let me counter what you're saying about counterfeit money. The government's estimate of counterfeit money, as the government revealed in its Supreme Court affidavit, comes from the National Investigative Agency survey of 2015. That survey says that at any one given point of time, only 400 crore of counterfeit money circulates in the economy, which is 0.028% of total currency. CNBC has calculated that only 0.0007% of the 1,000 rupee notes that came in, and only 0.002% of the 500 notes that came in were counterfeit. The total counterfeit was just 41 crore, which proves that either there was no counterfeit or it hasn't been detected. That is clear failure.
No, not at all, because you see, the point is that the initial estimate made by 2015, you wouldn't know whether that was based on some firm data, and neither would you know whether the CNBC figures, because RBI hasn't given out any figures. These are estimates, and especially and one of the reasons for which the RBI hasn't come out with its estimates is because the entire issue of the currency circulating in Nepal is still being investigated.
That's one explanation. The other is that the RBI hasn't come out with figures because it knows that if it were to do so, it would actually be embarrassing, because the proof then would be available that very little, if any, counterfeit money was detected.
Not at all. As I said to you earlier, the proof of the counterfeit money is that there are, you see, let me put it to you like this. The very fact that those two currency notes are not in circulation now at the point of time means that whatever counterfeit currency existed is now gone. So where are we? Why are we trying to do this?
Yes,
three decimal places or four decimal
now
places?
Gone could mean not detected, back into the system without being detected.
No, it couldn't be back in the system, because they just don't exist any longer. Those notes you will not take.
Can I put this to you?
Hang on.
You're surmising to defend the position of the government.
No, just a second, yaar. Anybody using a 500 or 1,000 rupee currency note today cannot use it, right? So that what if you had
99% of it has come back. So what I'm saying is, if there was counterfeit, it's back in the system.
But the point is that it's not come back to the system. At worst, it is sitting somewhere in the bank vaults and is not in circulation.
Quite right, but it hasn't been detected. The figures that I'm quoting to you, done by CNBC, are based upon what the RBI put out on the 31st of August. RBI hasn't put out anything of its own.
What are you more interested in? Are we more interested in the counterfeit money not being in circulation, or are we interested in the fact that some people who had that counterfeit money may have now an equal amount in the
if it's the second, then you've completely failed. No. Because if the counterfeit money has been put into banks and they've got proper money in return, it's completely failed.
Because the use of cash is always in its velocity and not in its store. So what you don't want is counterfeit money being circulated, sloshing around the country.
But what you also don't want is counterfeit money being exchanged for real money, because then it becomes genuine.
No, of course not. You don't. But this is where you come to the point that all these are estimates, and I don't think we should, given what you had said of 400 crore in 14.86 lakh crores.
That is an estimate the government gave the Supreme Court in its affidavit.
I think this is a typical case of taking the speck and counting it as one of the stars.
Except that
now,
is an estimate.
Why would you waste so much time on an
Except
interview?
that's an estimate the government gave the
But
Supreme
why
Court in
would
an
you
affidavit.
waste?
That's the
Why would
government's
you waste
basis.
so much airtime on an issue which doesn't even in the 10th decimal place of the currency in circulation?
All right.
I mean, this just is a case of completely wrong priorities.
All right, let's come then to the second thing, which is to do with terror funding. Now, on the 1st of September, just the day after the RBI had released information that pretty close to 99% had come back into the system, the Finance Ministry issued a statement. And this is what it said, I'm quoting, "As a result of demonetization of specified bank notes, terrorist and Naxalite financing stopped almost entirely. No proof was given, so this is simply an assertion. The problem is, terror continues. We've had terror attacks on the BSF camp in Srinagar in October. We've had terror attacks at Pulwama in October, on the 4th of October, a terror attack on the BSF camp near Srinagar airport, a 9-hour battle. By the way, as we are recording this interview, there's a terror attack happening in Pulwama at this moment on Saturday at roughly 6 o'clock. There was a terror attack in Pulwama in August. There was a terror attack on the Amarnath Yatra, 5 killed. There was a terror attack in Kulgam district in February, 4 dead. In fact, the South Asian Terrorist Portal, one of the most respected sites, says that deaths from terrorist fatalities have actually gone up by 8.5% this year compared to last. So, clearly, terror funding hasn't diminished, or if it has, it's only happened
But
almost
you just
imperceptibly.
quoted one state. What about the left-wing extremist activities?
We don't know anything about that at
There
the
you
moment,
go, because there have been
unfortunately.
none.
Isn't that a surmise?
And no, it's not. There hasn't been any. There hasn't been any reported. But I think because of, I suppose your sort of, your insistence on being sensationalist, you will insist on not seeing the positive but only seeing the negative.
No,
you're free to do so.
I'm not being sensationalist.
No, you are.
I'm discussing.
No, you are, because if you look at the incidence of terrorism, even in the state that you've quoted, it has come down appreciably. You could of course say that, oh, the stone pelting was not because of, there's no funding involved there. I don't know what your defense would be there. But the fact that you don't cite or you don't quote the complete cessation of left-wing extremist activities, which was there before that, shows that there is a huge bias in what you're saying.
There's not. I'm quoting figures given by the government
but the
about
fact,
Kashmir. In fact,
but
Mr. Ahir,
but you're not
Mr.
quoting.
Ahir has actually said in Parliament that the incidence of violence in Kashmir has gone up this year compared to last. I'm only talking about terror, not violence.
Hello, but that's also terror. Or you don't call the left wing as terrorism?
No, I'm not talking about left wing. I'm saying incidence of violence in Kashmir.
No, but you didn't say that to begin with.
I did.
No,
you may have missed me, but I did.
No, you did not. You said the claim of the government was that one of the objectives of demonetization was to attack terrorist funding.
And the government said it had ceased entirely, almost entirely, and I'm saying to you that
almost is the operative word.
But if terror continues,
but the fact is that a large part of that activity was the funding of people out on the streets,
that you're saying has stopped.
That's apparently so.
Let's
which you will not acknowledge.
No, I'm raising questions. It's not for me to acknowledge or not acknowledge. It's for me to raise questions for you to answer them.
No, but the point is
I'm presenting government facts.
Karan, the point is to raise questions, which are unbiased, rather than take it in a direction which seems that there's a premeditated attempt at proving that a step to be wrong,
Kumar,
which I have always supported.
Dr. Kumar, I'm raising questions based on facts and figures that the government made available, first about counterfeit currency and secondly about the incidence of terror or violence in Kashmir. But I'm not raising biased facts. These are government facts.
My support for the demonetization had always been that it was a huge attack on the pervasive culture of illegality and illegal income.
Let's come to that, because that was the third big objective the Prime Minister set on the 8th of November, that it would tackle black money.
It will tackle black money, but also, to me, it would tackle this very pervasive and almost systemic culture of legitimizing illegal activities and giving the pride of place to those who had earned money.
You're identifying two things it will tackle. Let's take them one by one so that the audience can understand. Let's first take the target of eliminating or reducing black money. Now that we know officially that almost 99% of the demonetized money is back in the system, the government has to identify what portion of it is black and then tax it. That means it will take, first of all, years to do the identification, and secondly, you could end up with litigious court cases. At this moment, therefore, we don't know how much will end up being identified as black and what the gain to the exchequer will be.
Yeah, so how would you have gone about it otherwise? I mean, there are people, I suppose you included, who would have rather had bonfires of currency and the currency floating down the rivers and the nalas in this country, which had started in the first week after the 8th of November, and which, if it had continued, would have meant social riots and bloodbaths on the street because of the pervasiveness of the black of the black currency, of the illegal currency in the system. Instead, what has happened that this dubious black currency, etc., is now deposited in 18 lakh accounts, apparently.
But how do you identify which is black and which is white? Because that's the challenge now.
It's not. I therefore use the word dubious. Now, what you've done, therefore, what the CBDT has done, it has verified 13 lakh of those, and I'm telling you from data that it is verified 13 lakh of those and issued notices to them. And
that's not on the basis of, forgive me, sir, that's not, those notices are not on the basis of verification. Those are simply questions that are being asked.
No, that was
the CBDT made that clear.
That was done to the 18 lakh, and they've reduced that and done this to 13 lakh, of which, for example, 4,000 accounts have been actually seized as illegal, and 5,000 crore have been seized and not questioned, and no litigation. Just one second. Moreover, what the issue is that given the big data analytics and the technology that you have, this whole assumption that this will take years and it will not get solved, etc., is patently wrong.
Well, let me tell you why I make that assumption. It's not one that I'm making myself. It's made on the basis of what Sudhir Chandra, a former chairman of CBDT, said to The Hindu in December last year. His exact words were that the CBDT only analyzes 3 lakh accounts a year. The Prime Minister has revealed that 18 lakh are under scrutiny. After that, he's also revealed that some 2.1 lakh companies are also closed down. This means that the total at the rate of 3 lakh a year will take the government 6 or 7 years to do.
Why would you say that? Sudhir Chandra did not tell you that there were 30 crore 300 million bank accounts opened in about 15 months? That was also done with using
There's a difference between opening an account and scrutinizing to establish black money. The scrutiny is a more difficult process.
The issue is the use of technology, Karan. And the issue is not to assume a linearity from old times to new.
No, sir. What the use of technology can do is to identify accounts where there are dubious or inexplicably large deposits, and therefore you raise questions about them. That doesn't mean you've actually identified it as black money. The identification requires some proof. That proof requires going into possibly court cases because people will contest them, and that's why the process can go on for 6-7 years.
Of course, but if on the other hand technology enables you to come up with proof and evidence which is not really contestable and which the court will admit, doesn't mean that the court will carry on with that.
You're saying something very interesting. When you talked of 13 lakh accounts where notices have been sent, and you're saying these are different to the 18 lakh where questions were asked, you're actually revealing something that hasn't been in the papers. You're saying something completely new. So I'm just going to question that. You are absolutely sure that there are 13 lakh accounts to which credible questions have been asked on the basis not just of spot questioning, but on the basis of real doubt that the money is black?
That the money is dubious, and there are questions about those accounts where this money has been deposited, and therefore, Karan, what you've got is about 4.5 lakh crore of so-called black money at least turned into grey. And not this, this talk that's going on that everything has been turned from black to white, etc. Hang on, just one second. The more important thing also is that the number of people submitting income tax returns has gone up from 3.5 crore to nearly 6 crore this year.
Well, it's very interesting on the income tax figure because different elements of the government have made different statements about the size of the increase of people filing income tax. The finance minister said 91 lakh new people. The Prime Minister on his Independence Day speech said 54, citing CBDT. But in the economic survey, the chief economic advisor said 5.4 lakh. So there's a big difference, 91, 54, 5.4.
Because that was in February 2017. What the figure that Mr. Jaitley gave you is probably September. And what the figure that I am giving you is around the October of 20th. And that number, the fact remains that for some God-forsaken reason, you guys are not giving it the demonetization the credit for cleaning up this economy, for cleaning up the economy and reversing this huge immoral activity of generating black economy.
Credit cannot be given if information is not shared. You have made available for the first time details about this 13 lakh bank accounts to which specific detailed queries have been made. These are no longer questions being asked as in the case of the 18 lakh. This is something new being revealed for the first time. You need to share information for people to appreciate that you've done something.
That is being done, except of course that I think very often that people look at information sort of rather in a biased manner. Or
but no, forgive me, information can only be looked at with bias if it's available to look at. In this instance, what you revealed is so new, I didn't know it, it's not been in the papers, and I'm accepting it as a fact because you've told me you're vice chairman of NITI Aayog, and it's a credible thing you're saying that 13 lakh accounts have been specifically identified, not simply to ask spot questions, but on the basis to be proceeded against, which means actually there is a case there where you do some processing, and therefore there's good reason to believe this is black money. That is definitely something to the government's credit. I wish the government had made it public, but you made it public. Let's come to the
government.
Absolutely, but you're doing it in an interview where mercifully and thankfully you're giving me news. Let's come to the fourth objective identified by the Prime Minister, which was to reduce dependence on cash. Now, there is no doubt that in the first few months after November the 8th last year, actually digital transactions, both in terms of number and value, did go up fairly sharply. But then they began to decline thereafter, March onwards. And I'm not denying that in fact there's been some success. But I'm saying to you, it isn't spectacular or dramatic. There has been success.
How do you define spectacular or different? Well, in this by the way, and use your definition carefully, Karan. How do you define a spectacular or what is the other word you used?
Dramatic.
Dramatic in the case of a reduction of cash to GDP ratio.
Let me give you the digital transactions.
What would you define as spectacular?
Well, let me give you the digital transactions. 671.49 million in November, rising to 957.50 million in December. That was the high point, and then they shrunk back by July, August to 862.38. So I'm not denying that they've gone up, but having gone up, they've also come down.
The fact of the matter, however, is that the cash to GDP ratio in this economy, which is one of the highest in the world, about 12.4 or 12.3%, has come down to 10.8, and the economic activity has begun to increase again. So there you are. You see, the use of cash, and as I said, and I repeat myself, the pervasive culture of illegality has been attacked.
Except for the fact that shopkeepers are now reporting, not just from major towns like Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta and Chennai, but also from small mufassal towns, and certainly from even villages where FOP machines were in use immediately after demonetization, that now people prefer to pay in cash. And these people who've invested in those machines are now complaining that they're not getting the return that they hoped for. They're in the papers.
I haven't seen evidence.
There have been reports in the papers, in the Economic Times, in the Business Standard.
These anecdotes don't mean a thing to me, because I'm giving you solid numbers. And the fact is that India has, for the first time in 70 years, seen a reversal in the use of cash as compared to the GDP figures.
So just to sum up,
and this is very big deal.
So just to sum up, clearly you're saying to me, and I'm asking you to establish whether I've understood you correctly, you're clearly saying to me that in terms of reducing dependence on cash, demonetization has been very successful. The cash to GDP ratio has come down from 12 to 10.8, and that, if
not
true,
12, 12.4,
12.4 to 10.8.
They are important numbers.
That's absolutely,
and that is
a substantial reduction.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
However, in terms of black money, I've accepted what you said, that 13 lakh accounts have been identified, they are being proceeded against, there is a case the government has to pursue. That being the case, that is also, I deem it a success.
Yes.
When it comes to counterfeit currency being identified,
the
government statistics suggest a different thing.
You will continue to rattle the little toy that you have.
But it's not the little toy, it's the government's fingers. The government's fingers given to the Supreme Court.
This is the typical case of a person having said, oh, I've admitted to the two big ones, but I must have my little say. Okay, go ahead.
Well, that's kind of you to be so generous in putting it that way, except that you're not being generous, you're trying to belittle me, but that's your prerogative. That's your prerogative, and I grant you that.
Because your prerogative is to try and prove that the demonetization, which I think is one of the most historical steps that this government has taken and has had the courage to do so, you will continue to deny the credit for I don't know which reason.
I'm not denying credit. I'm asking questions. You're assuming that behind the questions is a denial of credit. I'm asking
because of the nature of the questions.
No, the object of the question is to put the opposite of your viewpoint to you. It would not be an interview. It would not be an interview if I give you lollipops.
No, you
the
won't.
idea is to challenge you.
No, of course, but
not to present your case to you.
Challenge me, and we could have discussed in much greater detail as to why 4.5 lakh crore of money in dubious accounts is probably equal to the amount that was swirling around in illegal economy.
Let me put this to you. Beyond the 4 objectives that we've discussed, there is also another element of demonetization that concerns people, and that is the hit to growth, the hit to jobs, and the human suffering. Let's leave human suffering out because people who stood in queues have done it and that's over with.
And supported it. While standing in queues in the sun, unlike us who are in our air-conditioned comforts and continued to crib.
However, since then it's emerged that growth has slipped down to 5.7%.
Demonetization.
And the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy claims that in the month of January to March, something like 1.5 million jobs were lost.
And you should have been there to overhear the conversation between the Chief Statistician, Dr. T.K. Anand, and Mahesh Vyas, where Mr. Anand pointed out to him that, did you take the seasonality into account, Mahesh? There was no answer.
So you're saying CMIE was wrong,
yes,
and that they made a basic error of not taking seasonality into account.
Yes, and please consult and contact the chief statistician of the country. Hang on, but the second one.
Can I just
no, I must answer this.
Happily.
As Lord Meghnad Desai, one of our good economists, has pointed out, demonetization lasted for 6 weeks precisely, and after that remonetization had begun. And therefore,
Dr. Kumar,
all this talk about
Dr.
despotic act and loot and plunder, I think is just that much baldy.
As we talk, the Business Standard for the last 3 days has been doing surveys of critical industries that they believe reflect the way in which small businesses have been hit by demonetization. They've done a survey of the leather industry in Kanpur, the knitwear industry in Tirupur, they've done a survey of the hosiery industry in Ludhiana, and regularly they do surveys of the textile industry in Surat. It seems cumulatively from those surveys, it seems cumulatively that the losses just in these 4 sectors are in tens of thousands. Cumulatively, it might even jobs, people laid off, tens of thousands. You could even say it adds up to perhaps even over 100,000. Now, these are people who've lost their livelihood,
and these are people who are now earning their livelihood in legal formalized sectors of the economy, and these are people who will not be supporting the generation of the black economy in the country. Hang on, am I hearing from Karan that he really supported people working in the parallel economy and not contributing to this economy?
Karan is not making a statement of who he supports. Karan is asking questions to suggest that in fact the hit on growth and the hit on jobs is pretty sizable, even though some of the gains haven't materialized as yet. They may down the road when the black money is detected and the tax paid and the exchequer gains, but at the moment the losses are apparent, the gains are not.
The biggest gain is, and I repeat myself, is one, I'm not repeating myself, is to start the process of formalizing the economy and pushing back the whole black parallel and the illegal economy, and the other big gain is that there is for the first time for the first time those who are working honestly and earning a good and honest living can hold up their heads and not be having to say that those who have just become rich somehow are my social icons.
I'm happy to say amen to that, but let me quote to you the Business Standard and the Economist. The Business Standard said on the 1st of September, demonetization was a blunder, poorly thought through and badly executed. The Economist, in the most recent issue, which came out earlier this week, says it caused great hardship and disruption without any clear benefit.
Completely disagree, and I think these are the people who, for some, I don't know their motives, but I think they are people who are not in favor of this of the Indian economy getting on to a sustained, transparent, clean, and
so
legal
these are
basis.
Biased opinions.
Absolutely.
All right, let's leave demonetization aside. Let's come to the good news we've had this week about ease of doing business. There's no doubt that when it was announced that India's ranking had moved in just 3 years from 140
Business Standard has endorsed it, I suppose.
I'm not just the Business Standard. everyone in the country has
Including the
endorsed
business
it. But you have to still let me ask the question, because you're still suggesting that I'm asking questions not as an interviewer who's presenting facts that are awkward, but because there's a bias in me, and that I question. But you have a right to think I'm biased. I'm simply questioning it. Let's come back.
When somebody quotes to be a single source all the time and not other sources.
I haven't quoted a single source.
No, but
all
you
the
did
time.
for the last
no, I quoted
minutes.
the Business Standard once to you just now, and I quoted the Economist as well. It's not all the time, just once. Just once.
We'll have to rewind and say that you've done it before.
I haven't in this
Standard.
interview. I may have done it conversationally at other times, but not in this interview. But anyway, let's come to ease of doing business. There's no doubt that when India's ranking improved in just 3 years from 142 to 100, that was a remarkable achievement. And in fact, the Vice President of the World Bank has said so in so many words. On the other hand, on the 30th of October, sitting beside Arun Jaitley, Sunil Bharti Mittal, one of India's most highly regarded industrialists, said, and I'm quoting him, "The ease of doing business remains a major concern." And the example he gave was that in Ghana, in just 3 days, you can get permission for a merger, even though one of the companies is based in the Netherlands. In India, he said, even when both companies are wholly Indian, permission for a merger can take over 5 months. So my question is, beyond the ranking, which we're all very pleased with, is there actually a genuine change on the ground? Because Mr. Mittal is suggesting there isn't.
Yeah. So in the ease of doing business, there are several aspects. One, let me say that ranking is different from a score, and there are 10 big categories that ease of business has, and a country like India's score towards the frontier may improve by in 9 out of 10, as it has done in this case, and yet its ranking may not show that, because others may have improved as well. So ranking is relative, score is absolute, and we should have looked at the score in looking at these things. First point. The second point, of course, is that we have just improved from 136 to 100, and we are not yet there in the top 10. So
142 actually, if you go back full 3 years.
136 last year, then 142 before. 136 was questioned because the base is not the same, etc. Nonetheless, we are still 100 on those rankings. That means that there is a lot more to do, and this is being done. And for example, in one of those cases, we have actually declined, which is on enforcement of contracts.
Yes.
Now that's a judicial problem. Now that problem may exist with us for years to come, because there is a whole new ball game out there.
In fact, it's not just a decline in terms of enforcing contracts. When it's a question of starting businesses, our position is 156 out of 190. That's pretty bad.
Hang on.
When it's a question of construction permits, we're 181. Can I just finish? There are many areas where, in fact, we are not making it easy to do business.
Has anybody in the government made the claim that the ease of doing business work have you achieved what you wanted to achieve?
But you haven't let me finish the question. The question I was putting to you is one that arose on social media, and I think it's also been brought up by 1 or 2 columnists in papers, that because there are simply 10 areas where in fact your score and therefore your ranking is judged,
9 out of 10.
You can actually concentrate on just those and game the system. And the question that was raised, and I'm putting it to you, is was there a sense in which, and this is not a criticism, was there a sense in which very cleverly we gamed the system and identified areas that we can target, get improvement on, and make sure our ranking goes up?
In positive terms, if you would care to look at it that way, it's also called going after the low-hanging fruits, and that is supposed to be clever, and that's not supposed to be.
I'm just asking, did we do that?
We went for those low-hanging fruits that we could achieve. Now, you can't change the judiciary overnight, you and I know that, but the more important one, because that's where I know a lot of improvement has been done, is on starting the business. What has happened is that the respondents are principally, a great majority of them are those who are already in business. A very small segment of those, as a percentage of total sample, come from those which have just started the business last year. So this comes out of memory of those who have been in business for a few years, and you will see that there will be a radical difference next year or the year after. As newer entrepreneurs who have benefited from the changes get sampled and interviewed.
That's what I want to ask you about, because if you look at the ranking of other countries, the Botswanas and Zambias are in the mid-80s. Bhutan is at 75. Rwanda, and most Indians won't even know where Rwanda is. Rwanda's at 41.
Sure.
When are we going to catch up with them?
I don't know. I can't say, depends on what they do and what we do. But we are going to try for
But
sure.
they're doing something terribly
We are going
right.
to try for sure, and we are going to fulfill the Prime Minister's objective of being in the top 50 within the next few years.
Well,
and
by the way, in 18
and,
months,
and,
in 18 months.
No, and by the way, a lot of it, and this is where I honestly believe that comparing Rwanda's and Botswana's and Mozambique's or whoever, or Ghana's, is so completely out of place. Hang on just a second.
That's what this system does.
Hang on just a second.
This system does it.
Yes, because you are a continental economy, and all of those indices are much more dependent on the state governments than on Delhi, and therefore to pull them all along, this is where I just fail to understand why our learned interviewers and columnists
don't turn it onto your learned interviewers, but thank you
No.
for the compliment. You've called me learned, which is an adjective that I'm flattered by. But actually, what you're suggesting, let me finish, Professor Kumar, what you're suggesting is that don't pay too much attention to the ranking between different countries, because actually we're a continent-sized economy. Rwanda is a small wee little state, right? Bhutan is even smaller. The problem is that actually it's the government that pays huge attention to the ranking, and the government wants its ranking to go up. You're saying the opposite to the government. You're saying don't pay attention to ranking. The government pays nothing but attention.
I'm saying that the effort required to move an oil tanker, learned interviewer, is far bigger than to turn a little small dinghy around. And there you have to appreciate that. And for the first time in 70 years, you've got the central government getting 29 governments on the same page and filling up and putting the data on the portal, around 98 variables, telling us how they are trying to improve the ease of doing business.
All right, honorable interviewee, I hope you'll allow me to be Chinese and repay the compliment. Let's come to another subject. An issue that is in the news, it's one that's captured the imagination of the Indian people, is the bullet train. Now, there's a debate amongst economists. Some say that in a country where 30% live below the poverty line, and where many begin to feel that perhaps the railway system, particularly in terms of safety, is now in a state of shambles, a bullet train is the wrong priority. Others say, given India's ambitions, this is the right sort of investment to make for the future. Where do you, as chairman of NITI Aayog, come in on this debate?
On the latter, because I saw the same criticism being made of Rajiv Gandhi when he wanted to introduce laptops, into the system. And
it was the BJP that said we want potato chips, not computer chips. I'm just putting that in because it was the BJP and L.K. Advani who made that criticism.
Having flattered me by calling me a professor, honorable interviewer, don't bring in now spurious and extraneous activities.
It's not spurious, extraneous.
You ask me a question, I give you a straight answer. For an economy which is aspiring to be on the front line of global technology, and which is aspiring to leapfrog the technological stages that we have in front of us.
This is a wise investment.
This is a very wise symbolic investment.
Let me then put two concerns about this to you, and again those are concerns that have been in the media. The first is to do with the fact that the Prime Minister has made a lot of the fact that Japan is giving us a loan of some $13.5 billion, which is roughly 88,000 crore in rupees, for a 50-year period at an interest rate of just 0.1%. And the Prime Minister said in one of his speeches, this is practically as good as free.
Viswajit Bhattacharya in the wire.
But let me finish my question and then you can answer it. And you're absolutely right. I will end up at some point quoting him, but not at this moment. At this moment, I'm saying something else. The point I'm making is this. The Prime Minister thinks an interest rate of 0.1% is practically free. But if you know, as you do, that the Tokyo Interbank offer rate is 0.06%, and Japanese government bonds barely get a yield of 0.04%. In Japanese terms, an interest rate, but I can't help it because that's how the Japanese system works. Right. That's not my problem with them. But in Japanese terms, a 0.1% interest rate is making good money, because actually there they charge 0.06, yields are 0.04. So I put it to you, when the Prime Minister says this is as good as free, is he mistaken or is his description misleading?
You got it completely wrong. And the reason is that if you are a millionaire and you have your marginal utility of money, I hope you're conversant with that view, with that concept.
I'm not conversant, unfortunately, with being a millionaire. I would like to be, but I'm not.
I'm sure you're conversant with both, being a millionaire and with the marginal utility of money declining as your money increases. You're giving me 1,000 rupees means nothing to you at all. But me receiving 1,000 rupees, a poor government servant that I am, means hell of a lot. So, in a country where the rate of discount, social discount and rate of interest that the government pays is more than 8%, receiving something at 0.1% is practically free money. Moreover, Mr. Thapar, moreover, Karan, the fact is that if you look at the social discount rate at 6 or 8 or whatever percent and extend it for 50 years, the net present value of 18,000 crore would actually turn out to be zero.
That would work perfectly, but for the fact that we aren't sure what will happen to the rupee vis-a-vis depreciation against the yuan. And this is where,
and Biswajit Bhattacharya, I know what you're
saying. But the audience doesn't. It's only fair that the audience should hear the question so they know what you're answering. Biswajit Bhattacharya has pointed out that in fact the great danger could be that if the rupee depreciates against the yen, India's debt burden could escalate hugely. He points out, and I'm making this point for the audience, that in fact today the rupee...
You're misleading the audience.
But you can answer that when I've made the question. He points out in an article for the wire.in that 1 rupee today buys 1.72 yen. 10 years ago it bought 2.80. In 85 it bought 19.77. And he says that if the rupee similarly depreciates over the next 50 years, we will be returning to Japan not the 88,000 crore we borrowed, but arguably possibly 300,000 crore, and that's not counting the interest.
What a foolish assertion to have made. Because that the basic assumption there is that your currency will continue to depreciate at the same rate that it did for the last 32 years, without recognizing the fact, and I don't know, I have not met Biswajit, hang on, without recognizing the fact that as economies grow, productivity improves, and as productivity improves, as happened in the case of Japan, for example, in 1964, it was I think nearly 380 yen to the dollar, and has now come, the lowest it came down was 84 yen to the dollar. The same thing happened to the Chinese currency. Why should Mr. Biswajit Bhattacharya assume even for a minute that if we are going to achieve our growth rates going forward, our currency will not stabilize and improve?
There's a gamble or an assumption on this stabilization and B on the improvement of our currency vis-a-vis the yen. And we're assuming it will be in our favor, not against us. That's an assumption.
The only assumption, Karan, here is that you will achieve your target of your GDP growing by a much higher amount and your productivity improving. Remember, Japan is already at more than nearly $50,000 per capita. Their productivity improvements cannot be as high as yours, because you've got a huge gain here. So that Bhattacharya assumption is completely false.
You may be right in saying that his assumptions are false, but all doubt would have been removed if instead of relying on a Japanese loan, we had used 13 billion out of our 400 billion plus reserves. Should that not have been the preferred route?
Not in a world where your northern neighbor has about $4 trillion in reserves and uses that war chest against you all over the place in all sorts of geostrategic manner. That's not. This is completely talking out of your head.
So Chinese
and this is why Raghuram Rajan has said that it is better not to touch your reserves, because these reserves are your guarantee that you will not get the shock of people moving out and portfolios moving out, and you will not get into an external.
So you endorse, as far as this point is concerned, Raghuram Rajan's position about using reserves. Okay. Let's then come to GST.
And I hope Biswajit Bhattacharya had also used that.
All right. Let's now come to GST. You know better than me that there are great concerns about the number of rates. There are great concerns about the way those rates equate with individual items. There's great concern about the fact that small companies have to go through cumbersome procedures which they find difficult to handle. And finally, there's great concern about the efficiency and functioning of the GSTN network. And this has led many people to say, the government shouldn't have rolled out GST on the 1st of July. It should have waited till September so that the system was more prepared and ready, so that these problems were hopefully eradicated. Did the government roll out GST somewhat hastily?
No, not at all. And the only thing is that one must recognize that policy making is not the art, is the art of the best, making the best in the world.
You're suggesting policy making is trial and error?
No.
I'm
just suggesting that the first best answer would have been a single rate, as everybody has said, including the Kelkar committee, which first proposed GST, I think about 11 years ago or something. But policy making is to find the best in the world of second best. And this is where, just a second. See, the achieving a consensus across all our states and getting there is like putting your foot in the door and opening the door to the biggest historical change both in economic and political terms, and the fact that GST Council is acting is responding sensitively
Dr.
means
Kumar,
that you would get to the first
Dr.
best.
Kumar, your argument would be very convincing, but for the fact that since GST was rolled out in January, on the 1st of July, we've had over 40 amendments and notifications. In over 100 cases, the rate has changed. Clearly, to many people, this suggests proper, careful, meticulous thinking was not done in advance. It was hastily rolled out, and now the government is having to correct what it should have actually put into place in the first place. And by the way, there's another GST Council meeting on the 9th and 10th when more amendments and corrections will happen. So that's my point. Shouldn't more time have been spent, more effort made?
They will continue, because in a case as complicated as GST being applied to, again to assert again on a continentally diverse economy, there will not be ever a situation where you would have been able to work out everything in advance, because there are millions of commodities, the millions of
So it's
products.
better to start and get it a little wrong and correct it rather than wait to get it perfect, because you can never get it perfect.
It's better to start and having waited 17 years, have the courage to do so.
In other words, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good.
Touche.
Let me put it like this. There's a lot of concern about the impact of GST on exporters and exports and on small businesses. How serious are those concerns?
The concern about the exporters was very serious, and which is why the council actually removed that and exempted the exporters from registering under the GST.
And small businesses and the jobs that they create?
The small businesses already have a lot of exemptions. You know that. And there is a whole scheme of composite GST, whereby they can just pay 5% and not even file the returns monthly. The small businesses have been a special focus of this government, that they are not harmed.
But actually, the composite scheme eligibility is to be increased from 1 crore to 1.5, and the taxation is to be reduced to a flat 1%. All of that is a proposal for the 9th. So it seems that even now, further changes are needed to secure small businesses.
Because as the government sees the government is, the GST Council actually is responding so, with such alacrity and so positively.
After the problems created, couldn't they have foreseen the problem and acted in advance?
This is exactly what I am trying to tell you, Karan, that you cannot foresee everything in as complex a subject as GST.
So this was inevitable.
And the complexity has arisen because of your attempt to get equity into the picture. You could have said, flat 12% or 15% and be done with it. You didn't. Why did you not do it? Because you said, oh, there are millions and millions of people.
I can't be unfair to the poor, hence I make it more complicated, hence there will be problems.
Would you have rather not do that?
And you're saying to me that these problems were not just inevitable, but they couldn't have been foreseen and attended to in advance.
Given the complex structure that you chose to go with, in the interest of equity. And I cannot see anybody challenging, the government for having safeguarded equity in this economy.
All right. There are, by the way, many who write newspaper columns who've done that, but leave that aside, they'll defend themselves. I'm just pointing that out for the audience. Let's come quickly, because we're running out of time, to the general state of the economy. Since since March of last year, right, the growth of the economy has fallen fairly considerably from something like 9.1% to 5.7%. Over a similar period of time, manufacturing has declined from 10.8 to 7.9, construction from 5 to 1.7, whilst the value of stalled projects has gone the other way. It's increased from 10.7 lakh crore to 13.2 lakh. Now, you know better than me that gross fixed capital formation is stuck somewhere at 38.4%. Bank credit
38 is too high.
Is it even lower?
Oh yes, because 38 was the peak.
So there you are, it's even lower.
38 is the peak.
And
and it's come down, unfortunately.
You're making my point for me, and I'm very grateful for that. And bank credit growth is just marginally above 5%.
Public sector bank credit growth.
Absolutely.
Please correct yourself.
All right.
And the growth from the HDFC.
But the question I'm asking you is, how do you, as Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, view this economic picture?
I'm very troubled by the fact that the economy had gone down, but we did start this government's tenure with the legacy of 4.1% is what we were handed over. After the BJP government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee handed over to UPA a growth rate of 8.3%. Now, so therefore, rather than quote 9.3, you could have said
under the new way of calculating GDP, 4.1 went up considerably higher, but you're not using that.
No, but in the last 3 years, the average is 7.1. I've said this many times. I'm seeing the economy bottoming out in July, and that the first quarter number that you got at 5.7 was the result of many contingent facts, including.
Will the next quarter be higher?
Absolutely.
What do you think it will be? I know I'm asking you to guess, but roughly.
About 6.2.
And what do you think we'd achieve for the year as a whole by March of 2018?
Nearly 7.
Nearly 7. So it will actually be under 7. Nearly 7 means under 7.
About 7.
About 7.
Yes.
6.8, 6.9.
7.1 maybe.
Okay. Another key concern is to do with jobs.
Yes.
One frequently hears commentary that India is simply not creating enough jobs. And now, depending upon whether you go by newspaper anecdotal reports or you go by the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy, jobs are also being lost. How worried are you about the job front?
I am so worried about the job front that in NITI Aayog, we've just started the process of trying to collect as much high frequency data as we can to get a better handle on what's happening to the jobs.
Do we not have good data on jobs?
We don't, unfortunately not. And in all these
Can I ask you, why do we not have good data?
Because we, the elite, you and me, don't give a damn about those who are not employed. That's it.
Is it actually the irresponsible attitude of our class?
Because why would you have had employment data once in 5 years otherwise? Tell me that.
So
if the NSSO comes up with this thick round where he gets the actual data once in 5 years and then thin data once in 2 years, why would you not have got the data?
So you're actually saying to me that we do not have a good idea
and this
of
is why,
how many people have jobs and how many people don't.
And this is why my predecessor, Arvind Panagaria, chaired a task force set up by this government to try and collect much better data, and that will be coming out next year.
I'll tell you why I'm surprised by what you're saying, because you're making it crystal clear we do not have a good handle or hold on how many jobs exist and how many don't, how many are being created and how many are being lost.
Especially because a lot of jobs are being created on the contract basis, which has been legalized and yet not reflected perhaps.
But how do you know that they are being created on that basis when you also say to me we don't have a proper idea what the job situation is? You can't say both things.
No, you can, because you can make some estimates, and which is what I said.
Estimates or assumptions?
Estimates, very different from assumptions.
I'll tell you why I asked that question.
For example,
because, let me just finish.
Hang on, just estimates. Sure. The EPFO figure says that their numbers have gone up by about 10 million this year. This is employment. EPFO is the Employment Provident Fund organization. Similar figures come out of ESI, etc. And for example, if there are, let's say, I don't know where to get the numbers, that if there are, for example, 100,000 trucks sold every month, they would need drivers. I don't see that data anywhere.
Well, yes, and that's an assumption. But let me put it like this, why I ask you this question. 7 to 8 weeks ago, Amit Shah said at a rally that something like 7 or 8 crore jobs had been created in the unorganized sector. Where he got that figure from, he didn't say.
No.
And let me just finish. He made this statement. It was picked up by the papers, and he is president of the BJP. In May, Bandaru Dattatreya, speaking as Labour Minister as he was then, said the following: the current growth is jobless growth. Growth is being reported, but it's not reflecting in employment generation. Now, either Mr. Shah is right or Mr. Dattatreya was right, but they both can't be correct.
I of course can't comment on either one of them. What I can say that as the chairman of the NITI Aayog, which is the body which thinks it's responsible for getting better data in the economic system, we have started a process with the help of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation to collect much better data, through our.
And you are seriously worried about the job front, as you said a moment ago.
I'm more seriously worried about getting the right data so as to know whether there is how big is the problem. It could be big.
When will you have the data?
Next year, I think around this time.
So we will be in a state of semi-limbo till next year, this time.
As a whole year, 70 years.
as we've been in the last 70 years. But it will take another full year before you as Vice Chairman are happy that you've got the data to make an assessment.
But in the meantime, as I told you to begin with, I'm trying to plug this gap by collecting as much high frequency data as I can, using big data analytics for it. I've set up a group with some of the best minds in the country to help me with that, and you will see numbers coming out of NITI Aayog before the end of this year.
So this is a key priority for Rajiv Kumar.
This is a key priority for the government. This is a key because our young population, their aspirations must be met, and the only way to meet them is to get them productive, good quality jobs. And this is why we have had the Mudra scheme as well.
Rajiv Kumar, on that point, we're going to have to end this interview. Unfortunately, we don't have time to raise questions about the recapitalization of banks. That we'll have to leave for another occasion. But we've been through fairly comprehensively all the subjects we've touched on, and I'm deeply grateful for the time you've given me.
Honorable Mr. Karan.